Hey everybody, Elizabeth Nader back with you, the Nader Narrative on Jersey First TV. Today we're going to talk about facts. Now, this is something in the past few years that has been at a premium, finding facts that aren't based on opinion, that don't come from maybe a skewed research angle or somebody with an agenda. Have you noticed lately how challenging it has been to just find the truth, just find facts based in actual real research? So we are going to help you cross that chasm from confusion to facts based in great research. And we're doing that with our friend from Just Facts, which is a great name for an organization that literally is just providing facts. So welcome to the show, Jim Agresti, the head of Just Facts. We are so glad to have you here, Jim. You're all about facts, aren't you?
I am. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And yes, you are so right. This world is in desperate need of facts.
Yeah, absolutely. And Just Facts, which you've been leading for many years, is a research institute that's not partisan. So it's not based on a political view, a political party. You're not funded by somebody trying to get their viewpoint out in the world. You exist to do the research in order to arm people with facts to make the right decisions or have the right view. Why does that seem so unusual? Have you noticed in the past few years it's been harder and harder to get the truth out?
It is. And part of it, quite frankly, is the internet and social media. It allows people to isolate themselves in silos that tell them what they want to hear. And the truth of the matter is, whatever the issue may be, there's often facts on both sides of the debate. And it's very easy to turn someone off if you tell them, hey, what you're saying about this is wrong. Now, this is right, and this is right, and this accords with your view, but not everything does.
Yeah. Well, that's sometimes hard to hear, especially as partisan things get and intense debates get over what's going on in our world. So we're going to do something fun for the audience, and I want to do this now on a quarterly basis or so. We're going to bring some of the facts that you've researched. And again, you're an incredible researcher, and you bring to your audience specific facts to help them understand the broader context of what's going on. So today we're going to go through some of those so we can educate our audience real quick. We won't be able to go real deep into each one of them, but I'm going to go ahead and ask you, Jim, to throw question number one out at me.
Sure. So, by the way, this is part of our Fact App initiative. We have an internet app and a phone app you can download to your Android or iPhone that will ask you this question once every weekday, or a question, tell you whether or not you got the answer right, and then tell you what the right answer is and provide a little context so you understand why it is right. So this is something we just published today, and I'm going to read it just so I get the words accurate. So forgive if I look away from you. But what is the primary cause of the tenfold surge in Central American minors who were apprehended illegally crossing the border during the Obama administration? So you haven't read this yet because it hasn't gone out yet. So take your best guess. Why do you think you had this surge, as we're experiencing right now in the Biden administration? Why do you think that was the case?
I mean, my guess is that we're just making it easy for people to get over the border and they have a better life here, and it's just open and porous. So why wouldn't they come here?
Yep, pretty close. So not exactly, but an interview was done at one of the border processing statements with these minors, and they all said, well, the president said we're going to get amnesty. Now, the president didn't use those words, but what he said is, we're not going to take the resources to kick you out of the country unless you commit a serious crime. So what does that tell people? It's an effective amnesty. And the Obama administration and the media would say, no, it's not an amnesty. It is, because we're not going to enforce the law under the
Right.
so-called prosecutorial discretion.
Wow.
So people arrived en masse, and the media started saying, oh, it's violence in their homelands that it's driving them here, and it's all these horrible things that are going on. But I can tell you this, before that tenfold surge, violence in their homeland was actually higher.
Wow.
So what changed is the Biden administration said, we're not going to throw you out. And guess what the Obama administration, and guess what the Biden administration is doing right now?
The same thing. So they're basically saying they're marketing in some ways to this group, saying, don't worry, we're not going to use the word amnesty, but essentially that's what you're going to get. So you're saying it's not economic conditions that's driving it primarily. It's not violence. It's not necessarily the idea that they'll have a better life, which of course they will. It's the fact that they won't be arrested and sent home.
So all of those things are drivers, and they're ultimately the underlying motivations. The question is, why does it get so bad all of a sudden?
Yeah.
Under the Biden administration, every measure of objective measure of immigration, illegal immigration, is worse. Whether it's apprehensions, gotaways, or another big thing is dead people trying to cross the border. You have this massive influx of people, way more than before, and you end up with way more deaths because some of these conditions are hazardous.
Right.
So people who care about immigrants would be saying, well, why have border deaths tripled under this guy? We're talking 1,000+ people. Those are real people, oftentimes kids, mothers with kids. And the reason is he's given them more of a draw by saying, if you come, we're not going to kick you out. Or the other thing is, well, you can apply for amnesty, and that's what the law allows for, but they're so lenient in letting people in that most of them never even get amnesty. They get here, they'll attend an amnesty hearing because they want citizenship and a green card, but when they don't get it, nobody kicks them out.
Right.
So they're here eternally, and every kid they have is granted U.S. citizenship under the birthright citizen clause of the Constitution, or should I say a misinterpretation of that clause.
Right.
That those kids immediately become eligible for every U.S. benefit in the welfare system.
Yeah.
Whether it's food stamps, rent assistance. So people will say, oh, these illegal immigrants, they can't get all these things. Yes, they can.
Yes.
All they have to do is have a child, and all of a sudden the government says, well, we'll give you money for your kid.
Right.
Well, the kid doesn't get the money, the parent does.
Right. So that it's an incentive. So you're really talking about the incentives, including starting with the promise that's sort of implied of amnesty, and then all the things that come from that. So facts about immigration, facts about the border. And as you say so well, if you are someone who really cares, and we should all care about immigrants and about the human lives behind this, you should look into the facts of what's going on so that we can actually solve this problem. Okay, so that's a fact, and that's interesting, and I can see that. Let's move on to the next fact.
All right, so this is an economic fact. We're totally going to switch gears here, and it speaks to a very common misconception about what creates poverty and what creates prosperity in a nation. So here's the question. Which of the three following factors is a primary driver of increased standards of living? In other words, if these things improve, standards of living improve. One is productivity, two is work hours, and three is consumer spending. What do you say?
Well, I'm going to say consumer spending. And the reason I'm going to say that is I feel as though when that goes up, we have obviously more companies making more money, driving more jobs, and the need for hiring. And then therefore people are making more money. And it's this beautiful sort of capitalistic cycle. So I'm going to go with consumer spending.
Answer is wrong. So that is the common misperception. In fact, productivity is the primary driver of living standards. And what separates the wealthiest nation in the world, the United States, from the poorest nations in the world. We have more technology, more systems, more communication, more cooperation, so that if you're building a house with modern construction equipment, as opposed to with a shovel and a trowel, right?
Yeah.
That increases the productivity of a nation, and economists are unanimous about this. I don't care if you're talking on the far left with Janet Yellen to economists on the right. the primary driver of our living standards, what separates us from society 1,000 years ago, is productivity. Productivity is how much we accomplish in an hour of work.
Wow. So wouldn't that then tell us that we really need to support innovation? Isn't it then incumbent upon us, if we want to continue to grow our economy, that we do all that we can so that individuals and businesses innovate and effectively increase production and productivity?
Absolutely, but with a caveat. Biden will say, oh, I'm investing in innovation. I'm investing in new technologies and businesses. But what the data show is those investments tend to be very poor. They have very poor return on investments because the market, these are things the market won't fund. The people look at them, people who want to make money and turn that into a profit will look at them and go, this isn't going to make money because it's not going to increase productivity or it's not going to have a need for it. The government gets involved and says, oh, I like this for this reason. Environmental, social, whatever it may be. And the return on investment is often very weak.
Right. That's because the government got involved, Jim. So, but if private investors look at innovation and if private equity analyzes potential changes that improve production, they often get it right, don't they?
I don't know what the percentage is. I've known from looking at studies that they get it right more often than government.
Yeah.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Right.
I mean, there's a certain amount of loss and risk in business, and that's part of the process of learning what works and what doesn't and gathering information. And by the way, information allows us to be productive.
Right.
We can take that knowledge from that failure and go, that's been tried before and it didn't work because of this, and this. What can I change? Maybe it will work if I change one of these things.
Okay, so productivity, that is what really separates us from other countries in terms of our wealth and ability to create wealth and a strong economy. Interesting. All right, great. See, I'm learning. I love this. So is our audience. All right, let's go to the next fact.
Okay. Give me a moment here. I'm going to scroll down and mix it up here. All right. So what is the average burden of the federal government's debts, liabilities, and unfunded obligations on each household in the nation? In other words, if you take up all of the federal government's fiscal shortfalls, you tally them up and you divide it by the number of households in the nation, how much are we on the hook for, each one of us?
Oh my gosh, I feel like I've seen this before. I know going into this answer I'm going to get it wrong, but I want to say something like, I don't want to go crazy, but I want to say something like $30,000 each.
Okay, that's really going crazy, Elizabeth, and let me tell you why.
Okay.
You know what the answer is?
What?
$1 million per household.
Are you serious?
I kid you not. The debt alone, just the official national debt, is let me get my numbers straight here. It's about $240,000 per household. That's just the $31.5 trillion debt divided by the number of households in the country. See, but the federal government has much more than just debt. They have these unfunded liabilities and obligations, things that they've written into law that they're on the hook for, that are not paid for. There is a federal law and regulations propagated through it that require publicly traded companies, when they put out their financial statements, to include these unfunded obligations and liabilities. Hey, I promised all these pensions to my workers.
Yeah.
When they retire, I'm not putting out that money right now, but it's promised, it's owed to them. That has to be calculated so that investors have a good idea where the company not only is at, but where it's headed. And when you add those in, you're looking at $135 trillion in debts, liabilities, and unfunded obligations for our federal government. And yet politicians are saying, we have to raise the debt ceiling. We have to pay for these things. Well, guess what? You're paying for it on a credit card that's already unbelievably loaded up.
Wow. I mean, that's insane, Jim.
It is. And let me tell you the scariest thing about the national debt and these unfunded liabilities and obligations. They don't always manifest in higher taxes. I mean, you never see a bill passed, let's pay down the national debt. We're going to raise taxes,
Right.
or we're even going to cut spending that much. I mean, there's a little on the table. It's a tiny fraction of what, we're going in the hole every year.
Right.
What they do is they inflate money. These manifest in ways that are not always obvious to people. Inflation. Well, what's driving it? Well, if you listen to Elizabeth Warren, it's greedy corporations. Corporations are always greedy.
Yeah.
Why did it happen now?
Right.
Why? Well, the government printed a ton of money, put it out in the economy, and it deflated the value or inflated the value of money. It manifests in wage stagnation. If your wages aren't going up, who do you blame? Your boss, right?
Right.
You don't blame the government, but there's underlying economic mechanisms that we document at justfacts.com. You just click on national debt, click on consequences. You can see the primary sources. These hurt people in very real ways, and they don't understand what the underlying cause is. So how can they fix it? By telling politicians, you've run me into debt, you've run my kids into debt, you got to go.
Absolutely. And hey, how about a mandatory economics class for everyone who's in an elected position? I mean, honestly, although sometimes I hear crazy things come out of the Fed and they're supposed to be, the economists better than anyone, right? But this is almost too much to understand. $1 million a household. You can't really even conceive what that means. Jim, is this increasing over time?
Dramatically. COVID-19,
Sure.
a lot of the bailouts that were done as a result of states locking down, that was wasted money. The lockdowns hurt more people than they helped. And then they said, well, we're going to pay you money to sit at home and do nothing. Well, you want to talk about increasing productivity. What does that bring productivity to?
Yeah.
Zero.
Right.
Right.
It's like it was like a layered effect of bad decisions on an already burdened, debt that we had already been carrying for so long. I don't want to get into the whole China thing. We can do that another time, but there's a huge part of that debt that's also owned by China. And that brings in a whole nother aspect, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, it's not really a huge part, but it's a significant part. Off the top of my head, it's about 5%. Again, you can find the actual figure on our website.
Yeah.
But that 5%, if China decides to dump all of that debt, that's going to create a major problem because they flooded the market with debt. I don't want to get into bond markets and whatnot, right, but basically would make it much harder for the U.S. and much more expensive to borrow money, service that debt. And China has explicitly threatened to do that.
Yeah.
They've held it over the heads.
Right.
When Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, there was some kerfluffle with China, and they publicly said, you better back down or we might dump your debt.
Wow. National security issue. Our debt has become a national security issue. All right. So now I'm feeling like I got to pay off this $1 million. So that's a lot. It's a lot of pressure. Feels overwhelming. We can laugh about it, but it's really not funny. And when we look at our kids, we know that they're headed towards something even bigger. All right, let's, with the time we have, let's move from that $1 million per household debt to one more fact.
Okay. So one of the most popular government programs today is Medicare. Yeah. It's healthcare for the elderly. And this started in the mid-1960s under LBJ, Lyndon B. Johnson, and his Great Society. And he said, hey, look, we are going to provide hospital insurance for all the elderly in our country. And we're going to do it this way. We're going to apply a tax that will be no more than this amount per person during their working career, this amount per month. And that's the most anyone's ever going to pay. What was that amount? He said.
Oh my gosh. I can't, this one's probably going to just make me feel awful how much has gone up. So I would think that he would have said something really small, like 2% or 1.5% or something like that, just so that he could pass this.
It was $1 per month, not even a percentage.
It was
$1 per month per worker. So Medicare didn't even used to have a cap like Social Security on how much you would pay.
Yeah.
Because you'd only get a certain amount out in benefits. Now, hang on a second.
Oh my gosh.
My phone's ringing. I'm sorry. I meant to turn that off.
I
So
would have voted for $1 a month, right? But
yeah,
not.
$1 a month. And here's the crazy thing. The tax is now technically unlimited. Let's say if you made $1 million a year, you're paying $3,000 a month in that tax. And worse still, that tax only funds 34% of what Medicare now is. So the rest of it comes from other taxes on top of that hospital insurance tax.
Wow, what a massive disaster.
So the point is, when politicians promise you, oh, I can do this real cheap, you got to look at the history. You see the same thing with Social Security, food stamps, every major government program, they start out saying, this is going to be cheap. You know, we're a generous nation. We should be able to take care of this. And what happens over time? It's creeping socialism is what it is.
It is. So the cost balloons, the burden to each person balloons, and then they go elsewhere. And in the case of Social Security, right, that's really an unfunded liability as well, right? That gets rated, stealing from Peter to pay Paul, all of that. That's incredible, Jim. Well, we are going to do this on a more sort of quarterly basis because your information is so good. Some of it's a little overwhelming to hear, but we got to deal with the facts, right? We've got to deal with the facts and not just what we're told by our elected officials. Clearly, our government is out of whack here financially and in other ways. Jim, let's go back to how people can engage with you on a more regular basis. You've got your website, justfacts.com. Talk about social media and the app as well.
Sure. So we also have justfactsdaily.com and justfactsacademy.org, where we teach people research skills. Wow. It's especially good if you have high school or college students. It's directed straight at them. But the surest way to get our content is go to justfacts.com /notification and sign up for our emails. We have 40,000 Facebook fans, but every post we put out, maybe 2% of those fans will see that post.
Yeah.
So if you want to be assured of getting the facts instead of letting Mark Zuckerberg determine what facts you can see, or even Elon Musk, right, and they're better than Facebook. We get much better distribution there. You need to sign up for our emails. We won't inundate you. It's a one time a week thing, and you'll get everything we publish.
And the justfactsacademy.org, that's incredible because we certainly need our young people to understand how to do good research. It's becoming harder and harder to know what is truth, right? And how to divine that versus what a particular search engine may decide to tell you is truth. Jim, thank you so much. We're going to have you back. This was so much fun, a little sobering, but really great. I appreciate you and everything you do. And to the audience, get in touch with Just Facts. This is something that will help you understand the truth of what's going on in our country and in our world and make better decisions with that information. Jim, we'll talk to you soon.
Pleasure.
Thank you.